I've used a lot of meal services, but Hungry Root truly stands out because it's built around the way real families live and eat. They don't just send meal kits. They personalize your grocery cart and meal plan based on your preferences and dietary goals. All I had to do was take a short quiz, and right away, their smart cart technology started building a cart that fit how we eat. Now, each week feels easier, like someone else is doing the thinking for me. I've been focused on cleaner eating lately, and I love that Hungry Root keeps out over 200 additives, including things like high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. Their meats are hormone and antibiotic free, and the produce options include organic and non GMO picks. They also stock brands I already trust, like Oatly, Vital Farms, and Harmless Harvest. One of our favorite meals has been the teriyaki salmon with green beans, light, flavorful, and done in 12 minutes flat. Plus, I've noticed we waste less food, spend less time shopping, and even save money by skipping those impulse grocery buys. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg and use code Dr. Meg. That's hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg.
On today's episode of Parenting Great Kids,
the standards we hold ourselves to and the standards that our children actually need are wildly different. But I think disability has taught me that that's sort of a standard imposed by other people. And the thing my daughter actually needs is a mom who's well-regulated and who can be with her.
Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. Here's your host, Dr. Meg Meeker.
Parenting is hard enough, but what if some of the biggest challenges aren't inevitable? What if they're built into the world around us? Well, today we're joined by Jessica Slice, author of Unfit Parent, A Disabled Mother Challenges an Inaccessible World. Through her work in the New York Times and the Washington Post, Jessica challenges society's rigid ideas of, quote, good parenting and the barriers, both visible and invisible, that make it even harder. Jessica, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great book, Unfit Parent. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about that today and your experiences. And I think you're so right on. You know, the idea of the parenting expectations that parents have, which often come from the culture around us, and our quote unquote society, which really is our friends, you know, we hear on television and music. We get a picture of what a quote good parent looks like. How do these expectations make parenting harder for not just all parents, but particularly those with disabilities?
Right. I became disabled at 28, and I think having gone through that transition as an adult, I have a particular perspective on this because I saw how the world shifted for me with my disability, not only my body, but how I fit into the world. And I think disabled parents and all parents are held to the standard of achievable perfection, or at least close to perfection, that there is this feeling that there's a right way to raise kids. And if we performed well enough, if we never got tired, if we always learned a better way to feed our kids, to talk to our kids, the best supplies to buy them, the best schools, the ideal type of friends, what questions to ask their friends' parents, how much screen time, what on the screen time. There's all these, it's exhausting. And the implied outcome and stated outcome is that if we make the right choice at all of those stages, then our kids will be safe and they will have a good life. And becoming disabled really taught me that there is nothing we can do to ensure safety, and there's nothing we can do to guarantee happiness, and that there is no achievable perfection. And for me, disability kind of pried that the hope of perfection from my hands. So by the time I became a parent, I just automatically rejected a lot of what I was seeing around me because it just simply couldn't work for my body and for my
Can you talk about
capacity.
your disability a little bit? It came before you had kids, correct? At 20?
It did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, at 28, I had my first child through parent adoption at 34.
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out how old I am now. I'm 42 now and she's 8, so at
Yeah,
34.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and I became disabled at 28. And I became disabled due to a genetic connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And for me, that led to a secondary neurological condition called POTS, which is now much better known because it happens frequently with long COVID patients. And so you're hearing about POTS. When I was, first became sick, it was very few doctors had heard of it at that point. Um, and in my case, what that means is that if I am upright, either standing or sitting totally upright, I get very low blood pressure, very high heart rate, severe nausea, start to lose consciousness. And then I have, a range of other symptoms that comes along with it.
Mm.
So I spend most of my time in bed. And if I'm not in bed, I'm in my power wheelchair.
Mhm. When you first had kids, were you nervous?
I don't think this is kind of like starry-eyed retrospection. I think I was not.
Mhm.
I was nervous about the foster system. I was nervous about getting our licensed, but at that point, I had been living in this new body for 6 years and was really confident in my ability to problem solve.
Mhm.
So 2 years before I had kids, I moved from North Carolina to California completely on my own.
Wow.
And, as a person who can't sit up for more than a minute, like, that's kind of a bold thing
That's
to do,
very
and
bold. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I asked a friend to fly out with me, and he came for a week. I went online and found people to help me with chores at that point. There were no grocery delivery services, so I had to find someone to grocery shop for me. But I don't know, I think disabled people and chronically ill people are very good at problem solving in their day-to-day life, and I had been doing that for so long and had, uh, honed those skills so that when I imagined being a parent, and at that point I had a partner named David, who's my husband now, I just knew I could figure it out
Mhm.
because I had figured out so many other things.
So you probably went into parenting with a strength and confidence that most parents don't have. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think from the outside, we became parents to a newborn without even knowing we'd have a newborn. We expected any child between the ages of 0 through 12,
Mhm.
and we were told it was most likely that we would have an older child placed with us because there's a higher need for foster parents of older kids. So not only was I disabled, but we also weren't prepared for a newborn. Like, we didn't have baby bottles or baby clothes. We had this like one old crib in the corner. We didn't even have the most basic supplies, and we had a 12-hour notice before we brought her
Ah,
home from the hospital.
that's tough in the best of circumstances, but yes, yeah, that's pretty tough. So, and it's a little girl, correct?
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
So when she came, most parents, when they have a baby come into the house, they're a little bit in shock and awe. This is a beautiful, beautiful baby, but I don't even know what to do. Where did you
mhm.
start? I imagine your husband helped you quite a bit, or where did you start sort of figuring out next steps?
Well, we thought she would only be with us for a few weeks
Mhm.
because that's what we were told. At that point, we weren't even licensed for adoption. And so my husband went to work the day she came home,
Oh my.
because we thought it was basically
Yeah.
babysitting. So I still remember I got back from the hospital with her. She was 8 days old, out of the NICU. I put her on We had this mattress on the floor in our guest room. I put her on the mattress next to me. I had a bowl of chips on my lap. And then
I love it.
I opened my computer and I searched, how do you care for a newborn?
Perfect. You know what?
And
You
then
should have had somebody take a picture, and that would be the cover of your book. Wouldn't that be terrific? Because
I know, I
every
wish
mother
there was
could identify. Yeah, go ahead.
And so I wrote down, I was like, oh, okay, so you do sleep, diaper, food, awake time, sleep, diaper, food, awake time. And I wrote down that order. And then I was like, okay, I can do that. And I set a timer for the next time she should eat. And then I posted on the neighborhood next door group. And I said, we unexpectedly have a newborn. These are the supplies I need. I can go out shopping another day, but if anyone has them, I would appreciate it. And, it's sometimes things like that you get to see the most beautiful parts of humanity, because within an hour, and I could even tear up remembering it, we had just trash bags and trash bags full of baby supplies outside our
Oh.
door.
Mm.
And so neighbors really rallied. And then a night doula or a night nurse in the neighborhood messaged me and said, hey, this really spoke to me. Can I come over and help you set up your house for this baby? So she came in and I'm still on the mattress, and she sets up this bottle sanitizing station because our child was higher risk and needed, sanitizing instead of just cleaning. She showed me exactly the best way to make formula, that you always need to do the water first and the cups needed to be level. And she just, taught us how to care for a newborn. And, and I think it showed me that there is no planning your way into ease, but that also community really is the answer.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful, beautiful first few months with our daughter.
And I think that's a wonderful lesson that probably somebody like you with a disability can teach non-disabled people, is that we're really not meant to live life alone. We're meant to
No.
live with an interdependence and a need for one another. And I sometimes think that what really is painful and anxiety provoking for non-disabled parents is this feeling that they need to do it alone, and they need to do it as well as their friends, as well as their neighbors. But you in a very opposite situation. You needed people. And talk to the non-disabled parents, particularly mothers out there who are listening, about the importance of needing another person, usually a mother, and how we can learn from that, and why we need to do that, and why we don't do it. That's a loaded question. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, I think we're kind of sold a bill of goods about what is actually within our capacity as parents, and often particularly as mothers, that there's this sense that if things are difficult, it's because you aren't trying
Mhm.
hard enough, you're not optimizing your time, you don't have the right routine, you haven't written your schedule down in the right way. There's must be a better way to meal plan. There must be a better way to plan out your cleaning. And, and if you're in the financial position, of course, there's hiring childcare and hiring housekeepers and hiring dog walkers, but then there's still the management of that. And there's this sense that it's all resting on you. And and I think finding community isn't easy. It's not like, oh, well, just have
Right.
community. But I do think what that feeling that it's too much and that you're falling short is actually an indicator of is that it is too much. It's not that you're falling short. It's just that you're confronting the reality that we cannot do this alone. And that I needed those baby supplies. I needed Renee to come and tell us how to do things. And that wasn't because I'm not a good enough mother. It's just because we're not designed to do this by ourselves. And and I think finding community is hard, but the most important first step is saying, okay, it's not that I'm not good enough. It's that this is a very hard
I
thing.
love it. Because you're absolutely right. Mothers who are not disabled feel as though they don't have an excuse not to be perfect, or to be
Mhm.
trying to be perfect. And in a way, you sort of started out saying, look, I am who I am, and these are the skills I have, and this is the energy I have, and the love I have for this child. I'm just going to go with it.
Mm.
And I think that I don't want to speak for you, but it seems to me that would bring you great joy as a mother and freedom versus a non-disabled mother who feels like she's got this motor running. I have to, I have to, I have to, I have to.
Mhm.
And there's no joy in that. So talk to mothers a little bit, if you could, about just dialing down. And if you had one or two things you would encourage them to give up, what would that be? What would those be?
I think one part that I'm very glad that I've been able to opt out of is this pressure to pick the right blank for your child, the right crib, the right car seat, the right stroller, the right formula, um because my decision for each of those items is based on what I can personally handle, and so, for example, for strollers, I don't use a stroller because I'm in a power wheelchair. So I got this $30 Velcro strap thing that some friends took apart and re-sewed so it fits us better. And then I ride around with, I now have an infant who's just turned 1, and I ride around with him on my lap. And this whole, there's all these conversations of, does the car seat that fold in the car actually keep the baby safe enough when they're using it as a stroller? And what if a baby sleeps and they're in it for more than 20 minutes? And there's all this anxiety around that, which is, an okay conversation to have. But I think being able to start from scratch with each of those decisions and say, like, what are my needs? What are the baby's needs? What are our needs as a family? And go from there instead of having each decision held up to the masses and to some sort of standard of perfection is real freedom. And so I think that's the first thing I would
It
say is this
is.
kind of opting out of the consumerism hope of perfection.
I love it because I think that when I see young mothers who are starting out and they're buying all the paraphernalia for their babies, they often ask their friends,
Mm.
okay, what do you think? And what do you think? And what do you think? And I think they rely on that. But subconsciously, what they do is say, well, if so and so got this kind of a car seat and it has, different,
Mhm.
capabilities, then I should do that one because if I don't pay for that more expensive one in the car seat with those capabilities, I'm shortchanging my child and I don't want to do that. That's
Mhm.
not real. And that's what I hear you saying is, you don't need to have all of that stuff because we believe it's really important, life-changing for us and our kids, and it's not. Talk about, turn a corner a little bit, breaking down barriers. Now, obviously, as a disabled person, you've come across a lot of
Mhm.
obstacles, living life outside of your home. I imagine your home is pretty well tailored to your needs. But what kind of obstacles have you found as you move about life outside of your home that make your parenting
Oh,
unnecessarily?
I'd love to talk more about that. And I also just want to say one more thing about what you just said, because I think it's so important, where you said that we have this feeling that we're shortchanging our kid if we don't get the more expensive or the right thing. And I think what that's really like cutting or getting to is how scared we are of how fragile these bodies are and how temporary our lives are. And there's this feeling that if we do it right, we can avoid our mortality. And then the very worst thing is to imagine our kids being mortal and fragile. And I think we avoid facing that by thinking we can make really good purchasing decisions. And I just kind of wanted to name that it's hitting at something really hard that we all have to confront.
Some days, parenting feels like chasing moments that never quite land. You ask a question, they shrug. You try again, they look at their screen. And you wonder, why is this so hard? That's why I love FamGabs. It's a 70 card deck created by a child therapist who spent 16 years working directly with families, helping parents and kids break through the awkward one word answers and really connect. The questions are open ended, thoughtfully chosen, and designed to get your child talking and keep the conversation going. There are even bonus cards just for parents to help you build your confidence in your connection toolbox. If you've ever wished for a better way to understand your child or just to have more meaningful conversations as a family, FamGabs is such a gift. Search FamGabs on Amazon and use promo code Dr. Meg Pod during checkout to get 10% off your order. That's FAMGABS on Amazon. Use promo code Dr. Meg Pod and get 10% off your order. You know that moment when your child lights up because something finally clicks? That's what every parent wants, to see their child thrive. But when school just isn't the right fit, that joy can fade. That's why I want to tell you about K-12 powered schools. These are tuition-free, accredited online public schools for kindergarten through 12th grade. They're designed to meet your child where they are so they can learn at their own pace, in their own space, and a curriculum that fits their unique learning style. And here's what sets it apart. This isn't homeschooling. You're not the teacher. K-12's state-certified online educators are trained to make lessons interactive and engaging using innovative technology. And your child still gets social experiences, clubs, extracurriculars, even in-person events. K-12 has helped over 3 million families give their kids the tools to thrive, and they've been doing it for more than 25 years. It could be exactly what your child needs. Visit k12.com/Dr. Meg to find a tuition-free K-12 powered school near you and enroll today. That's k12./DRMEG, all caps. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that going through COVID sort of brought that to the fore. And that is, as parents, we're really very risk averse. We want to do everything that we can to keep our child safe and to have them live in a bubble and, to buy the right car seat and the right stroller and so forth. But you're absolutely right. Our fear of the fragility of their life is something that we really need to confront, because we're not in charge and anything can happen to any of our kids at any time. And living with that reality, I think, frees us up from a lot of the fear that we have. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
It is.
Is
And
that correct?
it's not that I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I hate the idea of either of my kids hurting. But I also
Sure.
living as a disabled person and having such a dramatic transformation in the way my body works is that I've had to accept that that does happen to all of us. Our bodies hurt and we all will suffer. And I think just holding those two things at the same time of like, all I want is for my kids to be okay forever. And they definitely won't. And just the heartache over that, I think is where there's sort of this path of freedom through the middle of those things and the ability to hold both of those. And I think if we distract ourselves with all these other decisions, we're really just trying to avoid that.
And pretend
Yeah.
that the risks
Yeah.
aren't really there. And it's painful to think about something happening to your child. But I think that, for parents hearing you talk, the truth is bad things, hurtful things can happen and we can deal with it. I mean, look how tough you are and how strong you are. And you've got 2 kids now and they ride around on your lap in a wheelchair. I love it. I love it.
They do.
They must
They
love
do.
it. Yeah, because they must love it. Yeah, maybe learning to push some buttons and so forth.
Yeah.
Let's jump on then
Mhm.
to the barriers that you confront. Can you talk a bit about those?
So I think before you use a wheelchair, you kind of have this sense that there's ramps everywhere because you
Mhm.
notice where there are ramps. But when you're actually in a wheelchair, you notice how few places have them. We're in a city and I'd say about 70% of stores I can't go in. So when
Really? I
Mhm.
was gonna I was gonna think 70%. I thought you were gonna say 70% you can go in, but only 30% you can go in.
So if someone says, "Hey, do you want to meet here for coffee?" I go on Google Maps and I look at the street view, and most of the time I can't go there. And so I have to plan what I'm doing around where they have a ramp. When my 8-year-old is out in the world, she notices all the places I can't go, which is really hard for her and is also, building in her the sense of justice. She says, "Let's leave them a letter and tell them that mama's a
Good for
wheelchair
her.
need to go."
Yeah.
And also she went to a private school and a preschool, and both didn't have ramps. And so I didn't go inside her school ever. When we did parent teacher conferences, we'd have to do them outside, just like outside in the sidewalk.
Wow.
Um, and uh, people don't consider what that is like as a parent to be out in the world and just know you're not welcome or not able to go the places your kids go, and how that kind of hurts children too, to look around the world and try to reconcile the fact that it's not built for their parent.
Yeah, that must be very painful for your daughter,
Mhm.
to feel that is there a sense of rejection by others that you have because they're not, making their world accessible to you?
There are times where it makes sense to me. If depending on the business's resources, and then if they're in the basement and there's just simply no way to be accessible, it doesn't hurt quite as much, but there's certain times, like, if there's only one step up and it would only take them a couple $100 to add a ramp,
Yeah,
I do find that hurtful. I do. I mean, it does sting because I think you've just decided this isn't important
and that I'm
for
not
some
important.
reason.
I'm not trying to put words in your
Uh,
head, thoughts in your head, but that would bother me. It bothers me listening to you
mhm,
that others are limiting what you
mhm.
can do. I mean, to be able to go into a grocery store or, a mall or anything like that, but do you think that our cities are getting better about adapting, um, stores, schools to, disabled people?
I mean, certainly not recently because there's been some lawsuits pushing back against 504, which has
Mhm.
made a lot of workplaces accessible. Uh, I don't know. I don't know that there is much improvement. I think public transportation is often inaccessible. There's been a bunch of stories with no real improvement about New York City about how few subway stops are accessible. And then those that do have elevators, the elevators are often broken. So people end up stuck underground or waiting hours and hours and hours. In many cities, it's hard to get an accessible taxi or an accessible Uber. I don't know. I mean, I don't have like a great research analysis, but I have not seen measurable improvement or a huge push to it. I think it's often disabled people just kind of complaining and other
Yeah.
people thinking, "Oh, it's probably not that bad."
It is bad, and, I guess I've always assumed that there are these regulations out there that stores and new buildings have to be in compliance with regulations for, um, disabled, but I guess I'm wrong, so this is pretty discouraging. You talk about parenting being very isolating, and I would like you to speak to the friend of a disabled person. What can he or she do, um, to help that person, not just physically, but emotionally, and sort of go to bat for them, if you will?
Great question. And I think there's two things I would say. One is, in general, if you're planning an activity, say, "Hey, what do I need to do to make this accessible for you? I know our house might not be. Should we meet somewhere else? Or if we are in our house, what can I do?" And just sort of leading with questions and openness about accessibility makes a big difference. And then also, if there's shared spaces you go together, Maybe if you're not disabled, being the one who approaches the business and said, hey, have you considered a ramp here? Or I noticed the button that helps you get into the bathroom is broken. Could you please fix it? Just taking some of that burden off the disabled person because we're doing it so much in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And then the other part I would say is to value the disabled parent's wisdom, because we do often have something to offer and a perspective that's really useful. That I think when parents respect my knowledge and what I've learned as a disabled person, it also makes me feel included, and that I'm not, and that I'm not a different class of parent as a wheelchair user.
Do you think that people, friends, are afraid to talk to you differently or approach you differently?
I think some people are so comfortable with it, and it often depends on life
Mhm.
experience and personality. And some are afraid of saying the right thing. Even doing these interviews leading up to the book, I know I've had a few people say to me beforehand, like, hey, I'm really nervous about saying the wrong thing or saying something hurtful, or I don't really ever talk about disability. You're the first disabled person I've talked to. And so I think it depends a lot on life experience.
We only have a few minutes left, but I'd love to hear you talk about um, your kids and I'm sure your kids must get comments or have feelings about, because you're different than other
Mhm.
mothers. How do you teach them to handle comments or questions that classmates might have? Because I'm sure their classmates must have questions about your life and everything.
Yeah, so I think my oldest child is 8, and I think one benefit is that kids generally think power wheelchairs are very cool because they have a lot of buttons and features, and every class she's been in, I've gone, and obviously I haven't gone inside because I haven't been able to, but I've had, like, outside show and tell time where I talk to all the kids, I show them the features of my wheelchair, I read a book, I talk about disability, and I've done that just so that the burden isn't on her to explain it,
Wonderful.
and in general, unless she's not telling me, which isn't really her style, she would tell me, the kids all think it's cool. Like, when I show up at school, they all run to me and ask me to,
They probably wanna use your
the
wheelchair.
biggest issue
See how fast it
yeah, the
goes.
biggest issue is having them not touch it and say, like, "Please don't drive my chair. Please don't grab my joystick." Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what one of my grandkids for sure would do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to look at
Yeah, it's
everything.
more an
Yeah.
issue of boundaries than rejection,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then I don't know, as she gets older, I think being a teenager is so much different than being a grade school kid. Like, will anything that makes her different feel insecure? And then that's something I'll have to think about and work through with her with hopefully a lot of honesty and openness. But so far, she thinks it's cool. And the 1-year-old just likes riding on my lap. I think from his perspective, as a baby, when he's out with, his dad, like my husband, he's in a stroller. And when he's with me, he's on my lap. And so to him, like, that's obviously the better situation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he feels much more
Yeah.
attached to you. He probably gets more, touch from you
Hmm.
and so forth. I think that's great. One more question. Talk to the parent out there who, needs some help, advice from you. If there were one or two things that you would like them to take away from the interview, what would that be? What would a one or two takeaways that you would like to leave parents with?
I think it's that it will probably take our whole lives, but as parents, we need to do our very, very best to admit that we don't control much at all. And that if our kids are having a hard time or things, it feels like we're always behind, our house is messier than we want it to be, all of that, it doesn't mean we give up and don't try. But the sense of shame that we carry around, that if I were just better, if I were just stronger, if I was just never lazy, if I was just never tired, like that, all of that is corrosive and will steal the years. and that we control very little, and that somehow we have to find a way to do what we can and then just be there with our kids. And then I think the other thing is that as a parent who does almost nothing physical with my children, I don't wrestle with them. I don't like run around and play with them. I'm always sitting down. I have not very much energy at all, but they feel, I think, really, really seen and loved by me. And I have extremely close relationships with both of my children. And I think the standards we hold ourselves to and the standards that our children actually need are wildly different. That the fact that my kids always know where I'm going to be, and they know that I have a very, like, an almost endless capacity to sit still and be present with them and listen and delight in them, like, that gives them a lot more than, like, one example, than a mom who puts together, not better than this particular mom, but then if I were able to put together beautiful lunch boxes for them. And that's kind of to myself too, because I feel insecure, like, when my daughter's eating chicken nuggets and ketchup every day. But I think disability has taught me that that's sort of a standard imposed by other people. And the thing my daughter actually needs is a mom who's well regulated and who can be with her.
And I'll be honest, as a pediatrician, and I've seen thousands of kids grow up, what kids really want and need in the depths of their heart is parents' presence. And you give that in spades to your kids. And I think that is so much more important than a soccer game or a beautiful lunch or, anything else. That's what kids crave. Kids don't crave this running around and having this and having that and, having a tutor. They want their mom, and they want their mom to sit and be available. I mean, think about the security your kids have. They know that when they come home, you're always there. And the gift that gives them, and so the blessing that they get from your disability is enormous. Because if you didn't have it, you might have just rolled into what all of your friends are doing, that after school, you just drive everywhere, run home and sort of swallow something else, probably chicken nuggets, at 8:00 at night. And no wonder you have such a great relationship with your kids. Just the picture of you sitting there and being available for your kids at all times makes me think they must have a lot of security in their lives.
Thank you. I think they do. And I do feel insecure when I hear what other families do with their weekends. And I think about, for me, if we have all day Saturday, just because of energy and effort and logistics, I will probably get out the door with both kids once and go to the playground a block away for an hour. And that's the excitement of our Saturday, maybe the excitement of our Sunday too. And it's easy for me to compare that to other families, but you're right. I mean, they know where I am, they know I'm going to be there, and they know I'm available for connection. And I think the other stuff is optional.
Absolutely. Because that's what we miss as parents, is the extreme importance of connection and presence in our kids' lives. And I think, and that's to our kids' detriment that we don't value that and understand how important that is to our kids. My guest has been Jessica Slice, author of the fabulous book, Unfit Parent, A Disabled Mother Challenges in Inaccessible World. Jessica, you are so wise. And I thank you so much for coming on to Parenting Great Kids and, just sharing that wisdom and your experiences with our whole audience. I'd love to have you back on.
Thank you very much. I'd love to come back. Thanks for having me.